I woke up to the sterile smell of disinfectant and the steady beep of a heart monitor. My eyes struggled to focus on the white ceiling tiles above me. For a moment, I couldn't remember where I was or how I got there. Then it all came rushing back. The black SUV running the red light, the crushing sound of metal, the darkness. A nurse noticed I was awake and rushed to my side. "Mr. Patterson, can you hear me? You're in Portland General Hospital. You've been unconscious for almost 3 months. 3 months." The words didn't make sense. I tried to speak, but my throat was too dry. The nurse brought water, and slowly, painfully, I managed to ask the question that had formed in my foggy mind. "My son, Brandon, is he here?" The nurse's expression shifted slightly. "Your son visits regularly. I'll call him right away. He'll be so relieved you're awake." Brandon arrived within the hour. He burst through the door with what looked like genuine concern on his face. Though looking back now, I wonder if I was just seeing what I wanted to see. He was 42 years old, tall like me, with the same dark hair I had before it turned gray. He hugged me carefully, mindful of the tubes and wires still connected to my body. "Dad, thank God. We thought we'd lost you. What happened?" I asked, my voice still weak. "Car accident? You don't remember? A drunk driver ran a red light on Morrison Street. Your car flipped twice." He squeezed my hand. "The doctor said you were lucky to survive it all." Over the next few days, as I regained my strength, Brandon visited every evening. He brought me updates about my recovery, about the physical therapy I'd need, about the long road ahead. But there was something else in his visits. Attention I couldn't quite place. He seemed eager to discuss certain topics and evasive about others. On the 4th day, he brought papers. "Dad, we need to talk about some practical matters," he said, sitting in the chair beside my bed. "While you were unconscious, there were decisions that had to be made. Medical expenses, the house, everything." "What about the house?" I asked, suddenly alert despite the medication. Brandon wouldn't meet my eyes. "Dad, the medical bills were enormous. The insurance covered some of it, but there were gaps. Experimental treatments, specialists. I had to make some difficult choices." My chest tightened, and it wasn't from my injuries. "What kind of choices?" "I sold the house," he said quickly, as if saying it faster would make it hurt less. "I had power of attorney. The bills were piling up, and I thought it was the only way. The house, the 3-bedroom Craftsman on Northwest 23rd Avenue that my wife Catherine and I had bought 35 years ago, where we'd raised Brandon, where Catherine had died 5 years earlier from cancer in our bedroom, holding my hand, where every corner held a memory. "You sold our house," I whispered. "I had no choice, Dad. The bills were over $400,000. The house sold for $850,000. After the realtor fees and closing costs, we cleared about $790,000. The medical bills are paid, and there's money left for your recovery and care." Something didn't add up, but my mind was still foggy from the medication and the shock. "Where am I going to live when I get out?" "I've arranged everything," Brandon said, his voice taking on a practiced professional tone, the same tone he used with his real estate clients. "There's a nice assisted living facility in Beaverton. You'll have your own apartment, 24-hour care, everything you need." "I don't need assisted living," I protested. "I need my home." "Dad, you're 68 years old, and you were in a coma for 3 months. You're going to need round-the-clock care for a while. This is the best solution." But it wasn't about what was best for me. Even through my weakened state, I could sense that. It was about what was convenient for Brandon. The next day, when Brandon wasn't there, I asked the nurse to bring me my phone. My hands trembled as I scrolled through Facebook, Instagram, all the places young people documented their lives. It took me a while to find Brandon's Instagram account. He'd blocked me months ago after I'd criticized some of his posts, and I'd never bothered to look at his social media since then. But I could still search for him publicly. What I saw made my blood run cold. There, dated just 6 weeks ago, while I was supposedly in a coma fighting for my life, was a photo of Brandon and his wife Amber on a pristine beach. The caption read, "Finally taking that dream vacation to the Maldives, worth every penny, living our best life." The post had a location tag, Conrad Maldives Rangali Island. I scrolled further. More photos from the Maldives, Brandon in the infinity pool, Amber with a cocktail at sunset, a video of them on a private yacht. Another post from 2 weeks ago showed Brandon standing next to a brand new silver Tesla Model S new ride. Dreams do come true. My son had spent my money while I lay unconscious, while he told the hospital staff and my friends that he was making difficult sacrifices to pay for my care. He'd been living like a lottery winner. I closed my eyes, but the images remained burned in my mind. The rage that filled me was unlike anything I'd ever felt. Not just because of the money, but because of the betrayal. I'd spent my entire life supporting Brandon. I'd paid for his college when he couldn't get scholarships. I'd signed his first mortgage. I'd bailed him out of bad business deals more than once. And this was how he repaid me. But beneath the rage was something else. A memory sharp and clear despite everything else being foggy. Something about the power of attorney. Something I'd done before the accident. I pressed the call button for the nurse. "I need to make a phone call," I said. "It's urgent." She brought me the hospital phone and I dialed a number I knew by heart. Gerald Matthews, my attorney and one of my closest friends for over 30 years. We had met when we were both young engineers working for Intel. He'd gone to law school at night while working, eventually making partner at one of Portland's most respected firms. "Thomas." Gerald's voice was thick with emotion when he answered. "My God, they told me you woke up. How are you feeling?" "I need to ask you something, Gerald," I said, skipping the pleasantries, "and I need you to be completely honest with me." "Of course." The power of attorney I had with Brandon. "Do you remember what I did with it?" There was a pause. Then Gerald's voice came back, careful and measured. "Thomas, I remember very clearly. About 2 weeks before your accident, you came to my office. You were concerned about some things you'd noticed with Brandon's finances. You said you wanted to revoke his power of attorney and make me your attorney in fact instead." My heart pounded. "Did we complete it?" "Yes. We filed it with the county on March 15th, 3 days before your accident. Brandon's power of attorney was officially revoked. I have all the documentation." I closed my eyes and for the first time since waking up, I felt something other than pain and confusion. I felt a grim satisfaction because I remembered now. I remembered going to Gerald's office. I remembered my concerns about Brandon's gambling, his mounting debts, his increasingly desperate requests for loans. And I remembered one more thing. "Gerald," I said slowly, "who bought my house?" There was a smile in his voice when he answered. "I did, Thomas. You and I discussed this possibility before your accident. You were worried Brandon might try something if you ever became incapacitated, so we set up a contingency. If anyone tried to sell your property while you were unable to consent, I had first right of refusal as your attorney. In fact, when the listing appeared, I purchased it immediately through an LLC. Your house is in my name legally, but it's held in trust for you. All Brandon knows is that it's sold to a corporate buyer." I wanted to laugh and cry at the same time. "So, the sale isn't valid." "The sale is valid, but it was made without proper authority. Brandon forged documents claiming he still had power of attorney. That's fraud, Thomas. And since I'm the buyer and I was acting under your instructions, we can void the transaction and restore full ownership to you. But more importantly, Brandon has committed multiple felonies. What do I do? First, you recover. Second, we document everything. Third, we decide how you want to handle this. But Thomas," Gerald's voice turned serious, "you need to know that if we pursue this legally, Brandon will likely face criminal charges. Wire fraud, forgery, elderly financial abuse. He could go to prison. I thought about that, about my only son behind bars, about the grandson I rarely saw because Amber didn't think I was wealthy enough to be a proper grandfather, about Catherine and what she would want me to do. Document everything, I told Gerald, but I want to handle the confrontation my way. Over the next 3 weeks, as I went through physical therapy and regained my strength, Gerald worked behind the scenes. He hired a private investigator who documented Brandon's spending. The Maldives trip had cost $47,000. The Tesla was $98,000. There were shopping sprees, casino visits, bottle service at clubs. In total, Brandon had burned through over $250,000 of the money from selling my house. The medical bills, as it turned out, had been largely covered by insurance. The out-of-pocket costs were about the $75,000, not the $400,000 Brandon had claimed. He'd simply lied. Gerald also discovered something else. Brandon had listed my house while I was still in the ICU barely 2 weeks after my accident. He hadn't even waited to see if I would survive. The listing description called it an estate sale and mentioned that the owner had passed away, which was not only false, but constituted fraud in the real estate transaction. I requested to be discharged from the hospital against medical advice. I wanted to confront Brandon in person, and I wanted to do it at what he thought was his victory moment. Gerald arranged for a small apartment for me near the hospital where I could continue outpatient therapy. Brandon didn't know about it. As far as he was concerned, I was being moved directly to the assisted living facility in Beaverton. On the day of my official discharge, Brandon arrived with Amber. She was dressed in designer clothes I suspected I'd inadvertently paid for. Her hair freshly colored, her nails perfect. She had never liked me. I was too old-fashioned, too judgmental of their lifestyle. "Ready to see your new place, Dad?" Brandon asked with forced cheerfulness. "Actually," I said, "I'd like to see my house first, one last time to say goodbye properly." I watched his face carefully. There was a flicker of panic, quickly suppressed. "Dad, I don't think that's a good idea. The new owners might have already moved in. Then we'll call and ask permission. I need closure, Brandon. Surely you can understand that." He couldn't refuse without seeming heartless. "Okay, Dad, we'll drive by." The three of us took Brandon's Tesla, which felt obscene considering how he'd acquired it. The drive to Northwest 23rd took about 20 minutes. As we pulled up to the house, I saw that nothing had changed on the outside. The garden Catherine had loved was overgrown, but the house itself looked exactly as I remembered. "Looks like no one's moved in yet," I observed. "Let's knock." Dad Brandon started, but I was already out of the car. I walked up the stone path Catherine and I had laid together, climbed the 3 steps to the porch, and knocked on my own door. A moment later, it opened. Gerald stood there smiling. "Thomas, come in, come in." Brandon's face went white. What are you doing here?" "I live here," Gerald said pleasantly. "I bought this house 6 weeks ago. Wonderful property. The previous owner must have loved it very much." I turned to look at Brandon. His mouth was opening and closing like a fish. Amber looked confused, glancing between her husband and Gerald. "You bought it." Brandon finally managed. "You're the corporate buyer." "Actually, a trust I manage purchased it," Gerald said. "But let's not talk on the porch. Come in." We walked into my house. My furniture was still there, covered in sheets. My photos still on the walls. Everything exactly as I'd left it. "I don't understand," Amber said. "Brandon, what's going on?" "Yes, Brandon," I said quietly. "Why don't you explain to your wife what's going on?" He looked at me with something between fear and defiance. "Dad, I did what I had to do." The medical bills were $75,000, almost entirely covered by insurance. Gerald interrupted, pulling out a folder. "Not $400,000. And you knew that, Brandon, because I have the insurance statements here. You received copies of all of them." Brandon's face flushed red. There were other expenses, like the Maldives, I asked. "Like the Tesla. Like the $37,000 you spent at various casinos." Amber turned to her husband. "You went to the Maldives. When you told me you had to work," she continued, her voice rising. "You said you couldn't take me anywhere, because all your money was going to your dad's medical bills." I almost felt sorry for Brandon then. Almost. But then I remembered waking up to find my home gone, to find my son had been lying to me while I fought for my life. "There's more, Brandon," Gerald said, his lawyer voice fully engaged now. "You sold this property using a power of attorney that had been legally revoked 3 days before Thomas's accident. I have the revocation documents filed with Multnomah County. You forged documents claiming you still had authority. That's fraud. You also listed the property as an estate sale and told the title company that Thomas had died, which is wire fraud. And you misappropriated funds from someone over 65 who was medically incapacitated, which is elderly financial abuse under Oregon law. I've compiled all the evidence, and the district attorney's office is very interested." Brandon collapsed into the nearest chair, my reading chair, where I used to sit with Catherine every evening. "Dad, please. I made mistakes, but you don't understand the pressure I was under. Amber wanted things. The business was struggling. I had debts. So you stole from your own father. I finished while he was in a coma. I was going to pay you back," he protested. With what money? You spent over $250 in 6 weeks. At that rate, you would have burned through everything I had in less than a year. Amber was standing now, her designer purse clutched to her chest. I need to go, she said. Brandon, I can't be part of this. Amber, wait. But she was already heading for the door. She's going to divorce you, I said flatly. And honestly, I don't blame her. You lied to everyone. Brandon put his head in his hands. For a moment, I saw my little boy again, the one who used to cry when he disappointed me. But that boy was gone, replaced by a man who'd stolen from his own father. What happens now? He asked, his voice muffled. That depends on you, Gerald said. Thomas has authorized me to offer you a choice. Option 1. We prosecute to the fullest extent of the law. You'll face multiple felony charges. You'll lose your real estate license permanently. You'll likely serve prison time. And Thomas will file a civil suit for the return of all misappropriated funds, plus damages. Brandon looked up, hope flickering in his eyes. Or I said, taking over. You surrender your real estate license voluntarily. You enter a diversion program for gambling addiction, which I know you have despite your denials. You pay restitution of every penny you spent from the house sale, which will likely take you years. You stay away from me, and I don't press charges. Dad, I don't have that kind of money. Then you'll work for it, I said firmly. You'll get a job. You'll make payments. You'll prove that somewhere in there, you're still the son I raised and not just a thief who happens to share my DNA. The silence stretched out. Brandon was crying now, and I felt my own eyes burn. This wasn't how I'd imagined my later years. Catherine and I had dreamed of a son who would take care of us, of grandchildren who would visit, of family dinners and holidays. Not this. I'll do it, Brandon finally whispered. I'll do whatever you want. Just please, Dad, don't send me to prison. One more condition, I added. I want to be part of my grandson's life. Connor deserves to know his grandfather, and you've kept him from me. Amber won't. Amber's going to have her own problems dealing with the divorce she's about to file. I said, you make it happen or the deal's off. He nodded, defeated. Over the next few months, things unfolded exactly as Gerald and I had predicted. Amber filed for divorce within a week, citing Brandon's fraud and gambling addiction. She got primary custody of Connor, but agreed to supervise visitation rights for Brandon with the understanding that Connor could spend time with me. Brandon entered the diversion program and began making restitution payments. He got a job as a project manager for a construction company, a significant step down from his real estate career, but honest work. Gerald helped him set up a payment plan that would take approximately 7 years to complete. The Oregon Real Estate Board accepted Brandon's voluntary surrender of his license in exchange for not pursuing additional disciplinary action. I moved back into my house. Gerald had taken excellent care of it during my recovery. We joked that he'd been the world's most expensive house sitter. Connor started visiting me every other weekend. At 12 years old, he was old enough to understand that his father had made serious mistakes, but young enough to still believe people could change. We'd work in Catherine's garden together, restoring it to its former glory. I'd tell him stories about his grandmother, about the life she and I had built in this house. Sometimes Connor would ask why I hadn't put his father in jail, because jail wouldn't fix anything. I'd tell him, your dad needs to learn that actions have consequences, but he also needs a chance to become the man he should be. And you need a father, even a flawed one, who's trying to do better. One evening, about 8 months after I'd confronted Brandon, my son showed up at my door unannounced. It was the first time I'd seen him since we'd signed the restitution agreement. Dad, can we talk? He asked. I let him in. We sat in the living room, the space heavy with history and hurt. I've been going to therapy, he said. Real therapy, not just the court-mandated stuff. And I've been doing a lot of thinking about why I did what I did. I waited. I was jealous, he admitted, of you and Mom, of the life you built, of how easy everything seemed to come to you. You two were so happy. And I couldn't even keep a wife interested in me unless I was spending money I didn't have. I blamed you for my failures. I convinced myself that you owed me, that your money was supposed to fix everything wrong in my life. Money doesn't fix internal problems. I said quietly. I know that now. The thing is losing everything, the house, Amber, my career. It forced me to look at who I really was. And I didn't like what I saw. "Who are you now?" I asked. "I'm working on becoming someone better. Someone Connor can be proud of. Someone you could be proud of." I looked at my son, really looked at him. There was something different in his eyes. Not the cocky confidence of the real estate agent or the desperate greed of the gambler. Something humbler, more real. "I'm already proud of you," I said, surprising myself with the truth of it. "Not for who you were, but for who you're trying to become." He nodded, tears in his eyes. "I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it." "No," I agreed. "You don't." But Catherine always believed in second chances. She believed people could change if they wanted to badly enough. Did she ever lose faith in people? I thought about that. No. She lost patience sometimes and she held people accountable, but she never lost faith that people could choose to be better. We sat in silence for a while. Not comfortable. Exactly. But not hostile either. Something in between. Something tentatively hopeful. "I want to be part of your life again," Brandon said. "And Connor's. But I'll understand if—" "Start with small steps," I interrupted. "Sunday dinners. Come help me with the garden. Prove that you mean what you say through actions, not words. I can do that." And surprisingly, he did. Slowly, carefully. Brandon rebuilt not just his restitution payments, but something more important. A relationship with his son and a fragile trust with me. He showed up for Sunday dinners. He helped repair the fence. He talked honestly about his struggles with gambling addiction and his efforts to stay clean. Sometimes when I watch him play with Connor in the backyard, in the garden his mother loved, I think about how different things could have been if I hadn't revoked that power of attorney. If Gerald hadn't been there to protect my interests, if I'd been less prepared or more trusting. But I also think about what Catherine would say. She'd remind me that sometimes the worst moments create opportunities for the best growth. That sometimes people need to lose everything to find what really matters. The house is worth more now than when Gerald bought it from Brandon. The Portland real estate market has continued to boom, but its value to me has nothing to do with money. It's the place where I raised my son, where I loved my wife, where I'm now teaching my grandson to be a better man than his father was. Brandon has 3 more years of restitution payments. Sometimes I think about forgiving the debt, but Gerald advises against it. He needs to earn it back, Gerald says. Not for you, but for himself. He's probably right. Brandon needs to prove to himself that he can follow through, that he can keep a commitment, that he's more than his worst mistakes. As for me, I'm 70 now. My hair is whiter, my steps slower from the accident, but I'm still here in my house on Northwest 23rd Avenue, still tending Catherine's roses, still teaching Connor about integrity and second chances. People sometimes ask if I regret not having Brandon prosecuted. The answer is complicated. Part of me wanted to see him face the full consequences of his actions. But a larger part of me remembers being a father, remembers teaching a little boy to ride a bike and do his homework and be honest. That boy made terrible choices as a man, but he's trying to find his way back. And maybe that's worth more than revenge. The other day, Connor asked me what the most valuable thing I owned was. I thought he meant the house or my retirement savings. But then he clarified. "Grandma always said the best things in life aren't things," he said. "So, what's the most valuable thing that's not a thing?" I looked at him working beside me in the garden, dirt on his hands, and Brandon a few feet away repairing the fence he'd learned to fix for me 30 years ago. The chance to watch people you love become who they're meant to be, I told him, even when they take the long way around. Connor thought about that. Did Dad take the long way? The longest way? I admitted. But he's finally heading in the right direction. And sometimes that has to be